Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Title IX Consulting Group's podcast and YouTube video where we are discussing important topics of the day. So let's go ahead and just jump right in.
Okay. So what I would like to talk about with you or have a discussion with is Title IX and intake. So questions we've got are, what are the important steps to remember when beginning an intake for a Title IX situation?
Important steps to take for an intake. So that is a really simple part of the process that is very complex, if that makes sense, right? It seems so easy to do an intake. You're going to get the person's information, provide them all the information that they need, and then walk away to move on to the investigation. But when we start to break it down, it is so complicated because we need to first and foremost remember the individuals coming to us for an intake are going to be very emotional. They are going to be the complainants of the case. They're going to be the ones that have a concern of some sort of sexual discrimination, some sort of sexual harassment, some sort of sexual misconduct. And so the first thing that we need to always keep in mind is to be sympathetic, of course, neutral, because we're not going to be taking sides, and be very attentive, listening to the details and jotting down notes. The notes that we write down are going to be used later for the notice of allegations or notice of investigation, depending on your campus, what you call that document. And the notes will be important to guide this case moving forward. And when we get that individual right in front of us, at least for us at Title IX Consulting Group, we're not going to look at these individuals as just another case. We're going to always remind campuses that these individuals, we really do want to be sympathetic, listen to them, provide them the resources, accommodations, support measures that they will need, and, remind them that we are still there, the school's still there, we are still there, whoever it is that they're going to, in order to support them and guide them through the process. Now, the process will be neutral for both the respondent, the person accused, and the complainant. And that's also important to remind the complainant about. There will be due process for the respondent, especially in the 2020 regulations where this was 100% reminded across the nation that everyone needs to enforce. And so this is where we begin with the intake. I'm going to just quickly say, outside of remembering to provide those resources and documenting every single aspect that you as a Title IX coordinator will say and state for the intake, in addition to that, you want to give a copy of the policy and procedures of your campus immediately, whether it's a hard copy or through email, either is fine. Discuss the difference between need to know and confidentiality. The reason for that is the need to know aspect is that as the Title IX coordinator, you will need to share parts of this investigation, parts of this case with individuals on campus that need to know. For example, there might be accommodations needed for the academics. There might be accommodations needed in housing. There might be accommodations needed for finance. And so there will be other administrators that need to know on, again, a need to know basis in order to help support the individual with the measures that they need and require to continue to feel safe on campus and continue their education. As a Title IX coordinator, you also need to remind them of the specific areas in the policy that exist. Now, they may have seen this in a training online or in person, but they're not going to know the policy and procedures like the Title IX office does. So going through the formal and informal process is going to be very important. And also going through the option of informal resolution. So going over the policy and procedures is going to be very important, especially to cover the difference between informal and formal procedures so that the student understands what the differences are and what the processes are for both. So for example, within the 2020 regulations, there will be a live hearing. So that will need to be explained thoroughly so that they understand what is in store if they choose and select that route. One thing to remember, everyone, is that with the 2020 regulations, the only way to go through the option of an informal resolution, meaning mediation of some sort of restorative justice, is if you file the formal complaint. You actually have to file the formal complaint in order to have the option of the informal resolution. In addition to that, you need to consider two additional aspects, the first being jurisdiction, and the second being the definition of sexual harassment. So, with jurisdiction, things do change with the 2020 regulations compared to the 2024 regulations. With the 2020 regulations, things are very specific to the campus oversight. So, specifically, what the policy states is as follows. Jurisdiction includes locations, events, or circumstances over which the recipient, meaning the institution, exercised substantial control over both the respondent and the context in which the sexual harassment occurs, and also includes any building owned or controlled by a student organization that is officially recognized by the post-secondary institution. So all of this is to say that on-campus cases will apply, and anything that is owned by or under control of an organization such as a sorority or fraternity, those will apply. But cases outside of the United States will no longer apply or be mandated to be investigated under Title IX. And, if there is, for example, housing off campus, like a private apartment, unless there is substantial control over the individual that is accused of some sort of sexual misconduct, unless there's some sort of serious control over them and their behavior by the campus, the case cannot be seen as a Title IX case. So again, jurisdiction is going to be something that during the intake is going to be an important aspect to write down, get the information about in order to make a decision later if this case should be taken under Title IX, if it reaches a threshold of Title IX, or if it should be dismissed under Title IX and perhaps seen under a different policy to correct the behavior. Now, I mentioned that there was two. The other portion of this is the definition of sexual harassment. You need to look at the type of specific behavior that is being charged, that is a concern. So the complainant is going to come in, be emotional, tell you all these things happened. You're going to be listening for three specific areas. You're going to be listening if it's severe, if it's pervasive, and if it's objectively offensive. It needs to cover all three prongs in order for it to reach the threshold of Title IX for the 2020 regulations. And so these are all the main aspects that an intake will be looking for and looking at. And then again, also at the same time, an intake is providing services and resources, all while also analyzing the case and taking in the information.
So with all of that, what are some easily overlooked aspects that people sometimes just skip over or forget to even do during an intake?
That is a great question. So what I'm going to describe are things that I've seen in expert cases when I've gone in for the lawsuits and I've done the expert reports where I'm analyzing an institution on what they did and didn't do. Some of the biggest areas that I've seen that are the concerns and the pitfalls in cases where the lawsuits really frown upon institutions is their lack of note taking, their lack of having a system in place where they took notes and the notes are readily available. They are something that you can track and see what they did in order to help protect the institution, right? You're looking to see, did the institution follow protocol according to their policy, and then also in turn according to federal law. And many times what I've seen is when campuses are being accused of not helping someone correctly or really veering away from their own policies and procedures or federal law, it's typically that they were not tracking things correctly. They were not taking notes. They were not taking a case seriously enough to jot down what was happening. And that begins to open up Pandora's box against an institution.
And then the one thing I always have seen when I've done my own intakes is getting the person that you're doing the intake with not to just give you yes or no answers. So, what are ways that you can reword a question or make sure you're receiving the right information so you can take the correct notes and have a solid intake? Do you have any ideas of how to get someone to go a little bit further instead of just saying, yes, that happened? No, that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think when we have that human part to us, that human aspect, and the complainant and the respondent are feeling that, you are really listening to them, you're being sympathetic, they're going to open up a lot more. If they feel that you are very stoic, which I understand in investigations and in intake, many times administrators are pretty stoic. They're thinking, I need to be neutral. I don't want them to know I can smile. Um, but that takes away the human aspect, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all smile, we all cry, we all have emotions. So why wouldn't a Title IX coordinator also have all those same emotions? So you can be sympathetic while still being neutral and have that trauma informed part of you that's asking the questions, where the questions are no longer yes or no. They are, how are you feeling? And tell me about your day. Tell me about that situation and what led this to happen. My questions are no longer yes or no. It is almost like a friend trying to understand and pull information from them and letting them know that they're in a safe place. They can talk to you, they can talk to what happened to them without feeling judged, without having this perception that the institution is not going to protect them. So you want to remember that human side. And, I've been through several trainings with several different companies and law firms. And I think one of the things I've always noticed is no one really talks about that human side to the interviewing. They do talk about the trauma informed aspect, which is very important and speaks to the human side, but they don't really necessarily talk about that sympathetic ear um, to remind the administrations that, again, it's human to human having a conversation. It's okay to talk. It's okay to take it in. And, there has been many a times where I'm talking to a victim and I'm getting my tears are there. My eyes are watering because I am listening to what they're saying. And whether or not it happened, they are saying something that they believe happened to them. They are saying something that they feel traumatized them. And so when you're empathetic, there will be emotion there. And when your questioning starts to come out, to really hear the details, they're going to give it to you further. They're going to give you more explanation.
So, how do you, though, draw a line between being maybe overly empathetic and neutral so that way they don't think that you're like going to give whatever resolution they want and you're going to be neutral because you still have to hear the rest of the intakes, the investigation still has to occur. How can you make sure you stay on the neutral line but have sympathy because they are another human and you want to hear what happened to them?
Yeah. And I think that really comes from the reminders of you are a neutral individual in the situation. You're going to listen to both sides and you're going to reach a conclusion through the investigation that is not something that you will do unless you're the Title IX coordinator and the investigator. I do recognize that in the 2020 regulations, you can be both. Um, but you can always say you're going to look at everything through a neutral lens and you're listening with empathy because you are human. You're not going to give them your personal cell phone number. You're not going to get drinks with them after school. You're not going to invite them over to a ball game to feel better. That is when you're starting to overstep. You're not going to do those things. You're going to keep it professional, and a professional can still have emotion. A professional can have emotion and still be neutral. You're not going to overstep, but you can lean into your emotions to have a conversation with them and remind them in the conversation that you're not going to be able to take sides. But at the same time, you can hear what's happening and you can have sympathy for what they're saying.
And then the last thing is, you've talked about this a little bit already, but always making sure that the person has the support um after. So what would you do to make sure that when you're all done with the intake, because it has been emotional and a lot of note taking conversation, how do you remind yourself to make sure that when the person is leaving, they've received all the support services that they would need or information they would need after the intake?
Mhm. So basically, throughout the intake, basically, especially at the very beginning, is where you should be discussing, are you okay? What do you need to continue your education? Again, remembering that Title IX, the main purpose of it is for educational success. So Title IX is there to protect individuals from sexual discrimination while ensuring their educational trajectory continues. So in that intake conversation, resources should always be brought up almost immediately. And then at the end of the conversation, after you've heard everything, you've taken your notes, you should again discuss, is there anything more you need? Or they may at the beginning have rejected resources. They say, I'm totally fine, I'm good. At the end of the conversation, again, remind them that there are resources and ask them once more. Do you need anything? How are your academics? How's your housing situation? How are your classes? Are you sharing a classroom with the individual that is being accused of some sort of misconduct? Do you see them in the hallways? Are they, sharing some sort of housing situation? I mean, there's several different aspects to this, but again, just kind of asking to make sure that they're okay. And if there's anything that you can do to help them out, that you're going to be able to do that. And that even includes with their faculty members. If they're in college, if maybe they need additional support because they missed an exam or they missed a quiz or they need some extra time because they have to go to a therapy session and or connecting them with a therapist and a counselor, all of these things can be things that are done and reminded at the end of the intake.
Thank you, Dr. Sandy, so much. That has helped me feel more comfortable with doing an intake and making sure I catch all the things I need to do and staying neutral. If someone was watching this and they needed some more questions, they could reach back out to our Title IX consulting group, frequently asked questions page, and be able to review any more information or reach out to us with specific questions, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. We're always here, as you know, answering questions, and we are more than happy to help support institutions and or individuals that are going through some tough times.
Well, thank you so much.